For a long time, historians believed the civilization of Sumer was unimaginably ancient. The earliest kings of Sumer and Akkad were placed in the distant past, thousands and thousands of years before Babylon. Huge gaps in history were accepted almost without question. It was assumed that one day future excavations would fill those empty centuries. But something unexpected happened. The deeper archaeologists dug, the shorter the timeline became. Instead of revealing vast missing ages, excavation began to reduce the gaps. And the ancient scribes, once trusted as perfect record keepers, began to contradict themselves. Their own records showed inconsistencies. Their chronologies did not always agree. It slowly became clear that some dynasties once believed to rule one after another had actually ruled at the same time. This single realization changed everything. Suddenly, the earliest history of Mesopotamia no longer stretched endlessly into the past. The scattered pieces began to connect, forming a continuous, believable timeline. Yet today, historians warn of a new danger, not stretching the timeline too far, but compressing it too much. Because in the earliest ages of history, we are still groping in the dark. To understand the age of Sumer, we rely on three fragile threads of evidence. The first, and most important, comes from the kings themselves. Across the ruins of ancient cities, archaeologists uncovered inscriptions carved in stone and clay. In them, kings recorded their victories, their temples, their achievements, and their ancestors. These inscriptions allow us to trace royal lineages and reconstruct the sequence of rulers. They even reveal moments when rival city-states briefly intersected in history. The second source of knowledge comes from scribes. Ancient Mesopotamians did not count years the way we do today. They did not say, "in the 5th year of the king." Instead, each year was named after its greatest event. The year a temple was built, the year a city was conquered, the year a great ceremony was held. This system was inconvenient for the people living through it, but priceless for historians today. Because scribes later compiled lists of these named years, creating chronological tables of astonishing value. From these lists, we discovered something remarkable. An entire dynasty, once believed to exist, had never existed at all. Kings had been duplicated. History had been repeated by mistake. Over time, scribes began organizing rulers into dynasties. One broken tablet discovered at Nippur contains part of such a dynastic list. Though incomplete, it confirms the order and length of the dynasties of Ur and Isin. This single tablet fixed the length of an entire historical period. It also revealed something important. Many dynasties recorded in later traditions had ruled simultaneously, not consecutively. And this misunderstanding helped create the illusion of extreme antiquity. The third source of evidence comes from archaeology itself. Clay tablets, contracts, deeds, receipts, everyday documents of farming and trade. By studying the shape of tablets, the style of writing, and the depth at which objects were buried, archaeologists can estimate relative dates. The deeper the layer, the older the record. But this evidence is fragile and must be used carefully. It guides us but does not speak with certainty. Without Nabonidus's calculation, historians had to rebuild the timeline from below. Fortunately, later history is firmly anchored. Astronomical records, king lists, and even a recorded solar eclipse in 763 BC allow modern scholars to calculate backwards with confidence. From these fixed points, the foundation of the Babylonian monarchy now appears around the early 21st century BC, a date far more recent than once believed, yet still unimaginably ancient. The story of Sumer is no longer lost in endless time. It is closer now, clearer, more human. A civilization not buried in myth, but standing at the true dawn of history. But even now, some of the most important connections in early Mesopotamian history remain uncertain. One of the greatest questions concerns two powerful dynasties, the first dynasty of Babylon and the dynasty of Isin. If historians could link these two lines of kings, we could anchor Sumerian chronology even further back in time. to the age of the great ruler Gudea. For a time, it seemed the answer had been found. A Babylonian king named Sin-Muballit once recorded the capture of the city of Isin. Some scholars believe this marked the fall of the Isin dynasty. If true, it meant the kings of Babylon and Isin ruled side by side for nearly a century. But later research revealed a different story. The capture of Isin had nothing to do with the dynasty at all. It was simply one episode in a later struggle between Babylon and another rival city, Larsa. And just like that, the connection vanished. Once again, the timeline faded back into uncertainty. The great ruler Gudea of Lagash now takes his place around 2450 BC. This date is far later than scholars once believed, over 1,000 years later than earlier estimates. Yet it fits the archaeological evidence perfectly. Working backward from Gudea, the famous Akkadian king Naram-Sin now appears around 2600 BC. His successor, around 2650 BC. Earlier kings of Kish, around 2750 BC, and the reformer king Urukagina of Lagash, around 2800 BC. The deeper we go, the more the fog returns, but one thing becomes clear. The earliest graves, seals, and tablets of Sumer reach back to roughly 3400 BC, and not much earlier. Yet archaeology offered a clue. Clay tablets from the city of Nippur dating to the dynasty of Isin look almost identical to those from the first dynasty of Babylon. The same writing, the same material, the same style. This tells us something crucial. No long gap separated the two dynasties. So instead of precise dates, historians now think in periods, broad windows of time rather than exact years. From this evidence, a rough timeline emerges. The dynasty of Babylon begins around the early 21st century BC. Before it, the dynasty of Isin flourished around 2300 BC. Before that, the great dynasty of Ur around 2400 BC. And before them, the rulers of Lagash. This conclusion surprised many historians. For generations, Sumer had been placed far earlier in time, but compressing its timeline does not diminish its achievements. If anything, it makes them more astonishing. Because when the Sumerians arrived in Mesopotamia, their civilization was already advanced. They already possessed writing, and not primitive writing. The earliest inscriptions we possess show cuneiform already far beyond its pictorial beginnings. This means the birth of Sumerian culture must lie even further back, in a time before Sumer itself. Sumerian culture would go on to influence Babylonia, Assyria, Egypt, and even the distant West. Yet one achievement stands apart from all the rest, not law, not writing, not kingship, but art. Because Sumerian art was not merely influential, it was original. The earliest Sumerian reliefs are crude, simple, roughly cut. Yet even in these primitive works, we can see the beginnings of innovation. Unlike later Assyrian sculptors who preferred safe and rigid profiles, Sumerian artists experimented. They dared to show faces front-on. They attempted difficult angles. They embraced foreshortening. One sculpture from the age of Gudea shows a god seated on a throne. His torso faces forward, his legs turned to the side, an awkward pose, but a bold artistic leap. Another relief shows a goddess seated upon a god's knees, her body twisting toward the viewer, not perfect, but alive with ambition. The sculptors of Sumer possessed a creativity that was entirely their own. Across centuries, their work evolved from simple, primitive reliefs into masterpieces of extraordinary skill. Later cultures would borrow their techniques, improve them, transform them. But the first spark, the original impulse to create, was Sumerian. One of the earliest experiments in realism comes from a small carved plaque. A man pours a ritual libation before a goddess. Her feet face sideways, but her face looks directly outward. The proportions are strange, the head too large, almost grotesque. Yet this was a turning point. The moment Sumerian artists began breaking free from rigid tradition. Unlike the vast wall reliefs of Assyria, Sumerian sculpture was intimate. Small figures, stone basins, votive statues, sacred objects. And in these smaller works, their craftsmanship reached astonishing heights. Fragments survive of animals carved in stone, cattle and sheep captured with remarkable realism. Even a single sculpted foot reveals extraordinary skill. Beneath it, a decorative border shows water flowing from a vase, fish swimming upstream, plants rising from the life-giving waters, symbols of fertility, symbols of life. In the temple of Ningirsu at Lagash, a great stone basin once stood. At each corner, a lion. One surviving head still turns outward from the stone, almost stepping into the world. A daring blend of sculpture in the round and relief carving. Another bold innovation. The greatest masterpieces of Sumerian sculpture are the statues of Gudea, carved from diorite, a stone as hard as iron, hands clasped in devotion, posture calm, expression serene. No exaggerated muscles, no divine theatrics, just quiet realism, human, natural, timeless. To carve such massive statues from such hard stone was itself an extraordinary technical achievement. Sumerian sculptors also captured human beauty. A surviving statuette of a woman reveals astonishing realism. Her hair falls in soft waves, bound with cloth and fillet, her form visible beneath her garment. Even broken fragments retain a striking elegance. Later civilizations would imitate this style, but they never surpassed it. The Sumerians were also skilled metalworkers. Long before the Bronze Age flourished, they worked primarily in copper, tools, weapons, votive figures. Even in later centuries, their metal objects show little use of tin. Sumer was not a Bronze Age civilization, it was a Copper Age civilization, and in that age, they thrived. By the middle of the 4th millennium BC, Sumerian civilization stood fully formed. Writing, cities, art, architecture, technology. Humanity had crossed a threshold. History had truly begun. As the ancient world slowly emerges from the mist of time, the story of Sumer reminds us that civilization did not appear overnight. It was carved, shaped, and perfected across centuries of human effort. From the earliest reliefs and statues to the refined masterpieces of Gudea's age, the Sumerians laid artistic and cultural foundations that would echo across Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the wider ancient world. And this is only the beginning of the story. If you enjoyed this journey into the first great civilization, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me what part of ancient history you want to explore next. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter of history.